Welcome to Messier Mantra. I'm your host, Mike Messier. On this episode, we have an actor. She's a very good friend of mine. Her name is Laine Wagner.
Hi.
Hey, Laine.
Hey.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely, anytime.
And you're a younger person. However, you've got like a lifetime experience already. But a lifetime that's progressively evolving, I'd say, and you're working with a really cool company now. Why don't you tell us the name of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm working with Missoula Children's Theater. They've been around for over 45 years. They've been going to all 50 of the United States, 11 Canadian territories and provinces, and now 18 countries around the world, including India. So it's a really big, very expansive company, the biggest children's theater in the world.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And so tell us about
what I do on a week-to-week basis and everything.
On a show-to-show basis, week-to-week, yeah.
What I do is I do this crazy, impossible thing that shouldn't be possible. Every Monday, I go into a different school system or theater or church, whoever is willing to have us in. And I'll cast up to 64 kids in a full-length musical.
Wow.
And between Monday and Friday or Saturday, I will teach the kids an entire musical. And I come in with a partner in a red truck, just a Ford F-150. I have an entire set. I have all of my costumes. I have all of my makeup. And we put on a show in 5 days.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And the groups, what type of groups bring you? School systems or churches or something else? Or?
It kind of depends on the season. There are
Right.
3 seasons. There's summer, there's fall, and then there's winter/spring. So for summer, it's predominantly like theater companies that bring us in to have summer camps there. During the fall and winter/spring, it's predominantly school systems that bring us in.
Right.
Recently, for the last 6 months, I was actually in Canada doing the job. And it was really cool because since the curriculum is less regimented in Canada, they would actually do it during their school day.
Wow.
As opposed to like an after-school activity. Because in America, we're like, the curriculums are so cut and dry. There's no time, with us always cutting arts programs, there's not as much time for the arts. Whereas in Canada, they really value drama. They value what it brings to their students and the educational, value, to say that a third time in a row,
That's all right.
of it. So
That's pretty exciting. So you've got your passport, you've got your, stainless steel water bottle or whatever. You're just like a road warrior, basically. Like you're just going all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. Traveling all the time. You never really sit still. It's me and my last partner used to always joke around about how people say they get to tech week for theater and they're like, oh my God, I'm doing this and this all the time. Well, they call it hell week. It's like, well, every single week for me is a hell week. And every single week I do that hell week with 64 kids and I do it in a town I've never been to before. It's terrifying, but so thrilling and so amazing, and it completely changes you as a person and the way that you feel about the world and the way that you view the world. Like, if anything, it just gives you such a great perspective on yourself and just on life.
How did you get this career path? Because I remember I met you before, like right before you got this.
Yeah, you met me when I was still working at a coffee shop. Basically what I did was I auditioned at an audition conference.
Right.
I auditioned at NETC, which is right outside of Boston.
Yes.
And so you'll sign up and you'll go and they'll look at your resume and they'll say either you're ready to be at a conference of that size or you're not. And I had done it for 1 or 2 years prior. And I registered and I got into the conference to audition. And I was called back by Missoula at this huge conference that like 30 companies were at.
Right.
And at that point when I was called back, I interviewed and I talked to the people at the company, and it was like an immediate thing. Like immediately I knew it was a company that I had to work for.
That's great.
Yeah.
You felt that kisma, is that the word?
That may be the word.
Or the preordained destiny, or this is my calling here.
It was so crazy because, my senior year, I was still in college when you first met me. I was in my senior year of college, and I felt like I had no idea what I was going to do. I felt like I was a mess, like everybody else. You feel like you're having like a panic attack.
Who am I and why am I here?
Yeah, exactly. Existential crisis of sorts.
Gee whiz.
And then I got called back, and it was just, I don't know, it just felt like the right choice at the right time.
Seems like a great fit, because I remember seeing you in South County, Rhode Island, and you had been on like a break from the group, just to visit your family and stuff.
Yeah.
And You seem really energized and happy. You're like, yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I think that, let me put this in the politically right sense. I think that going to college, getting an undergraduate degree is admirable. And I do think that it opened my mind, and I think that I learned a lot. But I think sometimes theater programs at the college level can be very toxic.
Okay.
You're putting 14 people in a room and you're saying, oh, we know that you want this thing. Like, battle these people out to get this thing that you want. It becomes a kind of like Lord of the Flies-esque. And I kind of like, after doing that for 4 years, I was a little burnt on it.
Right.
So going and doing something that was completely different than that was like way outside of my comfort zone, was so good for me and so energizing and so like completely different than the atmosphere I had been in for the last 4 years.
Right. Now, do you feel that is the competitive nature of theater at the collegiate level? Is just like, you know.
Yes, I do believe that theater is super competitive.
Right.
But at the same time, like, never in my life, again, unless I decide to go to grad school, which I would, but not right this second, never in your life are you going to be in a pool with the same 14 people over and over and over again. There's always going to be someone new or somebody less or this or this or that. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's just like such an artificial environment.
Sure.
Like, not saying I didn't gain skills, not that my professors weren't brilliant, but it just, there's something so transparent about it and what it is. And I felt like I always felt that when I was at college, and when I got out, I was so happy to be out.
A little bit of freedom.
Yeah, to do the projects that I wanted to do, to not always be auditioning for the same 5 people.
Right.
Who had their 5, favorites, because, they have artistic integrity, and it was just good to be out of that environment.
It's funny that you say this because I remember being in college for creative writing, and we had a lot of the, a situation at the school I was at where a lot of the same professors saw the same students, and then you start to feel a little maligned, like this. It almost becomes like you start thinking about the professor-teacher relationship more than even the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like, I think that's a very unhealthy thought process. It should be about the work. And sometimes it just felt like it was like, I don't know, like People Magazine, URI edition.
Does Professor X like me this week?
Yeah, do they like me this week? Am I going to do well? Am I in like good graces with them?
Yeah, and it's tough. And I'm happy to hear that you've found a home with your skills, and also not only as a actor on stage for these children, but also these kids or young people, whatever you want to call them, but also as basically the director, the producer, the director of these shows. These musicals.
Yeah.
Like you're and do you write the shows, or are they pre-written?
No, they're pre-written for you. You basically show up in Missoula and they teach them to you in 2 days. They teach you every single track in the show, and they're like, okay, here's a Ford F-150, do what you have to do. And you're like, oh.
Wow.
It's great. I mean, the first time you do training, like when you first started the company, it is like a 2-week process where it's like 10 hours a day, like it's really intense. But then after you know, like, what it takes to be a touring actor / director for the company, and you're just learning new shows, they only do like 2 days to train them, and then you're out on the road teaching them.
Wow.
So you have to, like, if there's anything other than perspective, another thing that I've gained is just trusting myself and being confident in myself, because you can't learn a show in 2 days and go out and teach so many kids if you're not confident, if you're not reliant on yourself, if you don't trust yourself to do a good job.
Right. Now, just the nuts and bolts, you said 64 kids. Is that an exact number, or is it approximate?
64 kids max. We can't have more than 64 a week.
Yeah.
And that's including assistant directors.
Okay, wow. Now, how many, what type of shows are we talking? I mean, West Side Story, or I have no idea what we're talking about.
We're talking about like classic fairy tales. We're talking about stories written by the Grimm brothers. We're talking about Hans Christian Andersen. Sorry.
Sure.
Stories like that have been reworked by the writer Michael McGill, so they fit the parameters. So the first show that I was on was Red Riding Hood, which was so much fun. I loved Red Riding Hood. And then I was on Aladdin, and now I'm going to be moving on to Sleeping Beauty. But it's so funny, you go into these towns, and of course they're very different than the Disney version, because Disney owns everything.
Oh yeah.
So, like I would go in every single week with Aladdin, they'd be like, wait, there's no Princess Jasmine, there's no monkey, there's no tiger, and I'd be like, sorry, those live in copyright land, and they're not in this production.
Because like, what's copyright? You're like,
yeah, they're like, oh, that's a different. Ask your parents about that when you get home.
Parents, we're gonna ask you too. That's funny, yeah, because it is interesting, like the legalities of all this stuff. It's enough to give you a headache, but at the same time, those rules and principles are there for a reason, to protect intellectual material.
Absolutely. Like, think about it, if it was the other way around, like if it was your intellectual property, you wouldn't want somebody else taking it, Those Imagineers for Disney, they work magic, man. They know what they're doing.
I'll just ask you, like, how did you get involved in acting in the first place? Was there a point as your own childhood where you said, I like to get into acting?
I mean, there were two big things. I mean, one was a boy, obviously.
Sure.
And the second was just the movie version of Chicago growing up. I watched it every single day for 2 months, to the extent where, like, my brother was like, turn that off. There's just, there's something about
Zellweger and,
Catherine Zeta-Jones' performance in that. Just, I don't know what it was. I remember just like being in 4th grade and being like, that's what I want to do. And just, it was funny because then I didn't get involved in theater until I was in high school, but I kind of always knew. I always knew that it was the right pick for me. And I think that when it comes down to it with theater, I have this huge belief that, like, for me going into college, I don't know if I could have picked a major other than theater. Like, I'm just so interested in the world.
Right.
And I think that theater is, like, the ultimate form of people that are interested in the world. You're putting a mirror to nature all the time. You have to just be, like, interested in everything. And I guess my curiosity and my interest in the world is also what drew me to theater in general.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's awesome, because, I mean, what a perfect all-encompassing answer, because what you're being able to do is to kind of bring your perspective and your, light, so to speak, to these kids. And I'm not familiar with the kids, but I'm sure like some of them are coming from prosperous homes, some not so much.
Well,
oh, here we go. Here's some photographs of Laine Wagner, your new headshot here. Let's check that out.
Yeah, and taken by a friend. It came out really nice.
Yeah, who did the photograph? Just
my friend Pat Bowlby dabbles in photography on the side, so he was like, hey, do you need some new headshots? I was like, sure. And
that's us. I was like, oh, wow, that looks like us. It is us. Okay. So back to the mantra. But yeah, a great new headshot by your friend there.
Thanks.
That's part of the professional world of acting, too, is like there's so many things we can talk about, but as far as headshots and stuff. But I'm really happy that you're meeting some of these kids, and I was saying, like, some of them are probably coming from homes that maybe not have theater even on their compass,
Well, for me, one of the biggest reasons why I got involved with the company is because one of the things that a lot of people don't know about me is that I was a child that was raised with special needs.
Oh, okay.
I had 6 years of speech therapy, which was grueling and it was horrible. And I was told for the first time this fall that there's a good chance that indeed I might be dyslexic.
Wow. Yeah.
Grew up in the 1990s, and they were afraid to diagnose anybody with dyslexia, although 80% of literacy problems found in children are due to dyslexia. And growing up for me was really, really hard. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I'm not gonna lie, it was really hard being a kid.
Yeah.
But my one saving grace was that I could go to the art room and I could really draw. I played violin. I was really great at anything that involved an artistic capacity of some sort. And so when I had that interview for Missoula Children's Theater and I heard about what the company did and I heard about how important it was to help these kids who don't have these chances or might be struggling with the same issues that I had, I realized that it was something I had to do. Like, I felt morally obligated to go and help people that were in the same situation that I was in, or in worse. I worked in the inner city in Philadelphia, and there were kids that I worked with where, like, their dad had thrown acid on their face, or they had passed a dead body walking to school. Things that I talk about my childhood being hard, that's almost like unrelatable.
Yeah.
And I just knew that it was something that I had to do. Even if it wasn't forever, it was something that I had to do at least for a little while, because it's so important.
Wow, that's just so much to take in. So, I mean, these kids really, I mean, you're basically helping them, and they look to you as really a, like a role model, and like someone who's going to come and kind of give them some glimmer of light for 4 or 5 or 6 days in their lives. It's tremendous.
It's crazy. I remember I actually just told this story recently for an interview, but I'll tell it again.
Oh, we just saw a photo of like what's this photo here?
So this was from when I was in Red Riding Hood. When I was doing Red Riding Hood with the company, you play the big bad wolf.
Right.
And I'm assuming this is the opening monologue. There's like this crazy long monologue, but yeah, that's from New Mexico.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So this is Missoula Children's Company in action, basically.
Yeah,
that's great.
Me on stage living the life, I guess.
That's fun. That's fun. And here's your headshot again.
Headshot again.
Yeah. And that's so people can look it up online, Missoula Children's Theater. That's great. Very cool. Nice. So I was saying that, some of the things you said about the dyslexia, yeah, I can imagine, because I actually, similar enough, like had a diagnosis of dyslexia that I wasn't even informed of for basically, wasn't informed of it until, yeah, I know, but it just, going dyslexia right now, but just having dyslexia, not knowing it until I kind of discovered upon myself. No one had told me.
Yeah.
So it's my own kind of situation where I was like, hey, do I have dyslexia here? Because I'm realizing, having just watched TV enough, that the discussion kind of came up about dyslexia, what it is, and there's various degrees of it. But
yes, I definitely don't think I'd be very far on the spectrum, but I definitely think, like, if you look it up, it can be so obvious and so scary if you look it up and you're like, okay, so they told me I had developmental problems, which was like the #1 thing that they said.
Right.
I read words backwards in books. Usually people who do have dyslexia to some extent develop a lot of artistic capacities because that makes more sense to them than like reading words out of a book as a child. It's really fascinating. It's crazy that if you had the same experience, if you go online, you're like, whoa, that makes sense, and that makes sense, and that was my childhood, and that was my childhood, and oh my God.
Right. And then for me, like, how some people say, oh, give me the phone number, and they take the phone number, and I can never do that. I need to have that thing written down, because like even like directions and just some of the nuts and bolts of my own situation, but like if someone, thank God for GPS for me. That's like the greatest invention.
Me too, yeah, I can't, yeah.
Yeah, because like when people would just give me directions, like go down the street and take a left. I'm like, oh, what do you mean by left? Well, what does left mean in this capacity? And they're like, well,
no,
left.
That's so true. That's the way I feel all the time. My dad was like, okay, so you're going to get to Seekonk, you're going to get on 95, then you're going to get on 195. And I was like, okay, these are all numbers, but I don't know what those numbers mean. Oh, the same way you get to Barrington. You should have just said that.
Right. And for me, before the GPS, I would literally go the same place. You go see certain friends or certain places, and you go all the time, but then you don't really understand how you're getting there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard for me in those days to remember how to drive somewhere without having it all written down, even though I've been there a million times, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think that after a while, I think I'm pretty good with directions though, because I remember things. Like when I'm on tour, I'll be like, okay, but then there's some towns that I'm in that I'm like, I have no idea how this town works. Like some of them are like grid system. I'm like, okay, grid system, it makes sense. And then sometimes I'm in a town and I'm like, I have no idea how any of this works.
Right. Now everything that you've experienced with your own situations with dyslexia and overcoming things, but when you're working with these kids, like you said, that have had these horrible things happen to them and are still happening, you're able to kind of relate to them, help them out.
Well, generally, when it just comes to people in general, I try and treat everybody the same way. Whether you're a friend, whether you're somebody I respect, I like to treat people as human beings. Because everybody wants to be treated just as a normal human being. And when you're working with kids that are like that, even though they've been through all these horrible circumstances, they still just want to be treated like a person. They want somebody to come in who's like, yo, do this thing for me. Just like the way you treat a friend. Just like they want to know that they're, normal like everybody else. But at the same time, like there are times, when things are a little different. When I worked in the inner city, it was very like, instead of like yelling at the kids, the whole staff would just be like, I really enjoyed that. Now go and do this, this, and this. Like they were very like soft-spoken.
Right.
Like direct eye contact, told them what to do, and then would like walk away. They'd be like, I'm very disappointed. And it worked wonders on the kids. Like I feel like we're so used to like, I'm gonna yell at this kid and they're gonna listen to me. But sometimes if you're just like, I'll wait, I'm disappointed in you, and they walk away from the situation, the kid's like, How do I process this?
Interesting. Psychology comes into it.
Yeah.
Is there any particular stories? I'm sure you have tons, but like stories of making a connection with a kid or a young person that you kind of like, you could see that in the course of a day or a couple of days? Like.
Well, I was about to tell a story before, but I don't think I got to it.
Okay.
So my second week out on the road, I was touring Red Riding Hood, and we are auditioning all the kids, the 2-hour process, and we got done and we're announcing all the roles. And we announced the girl who's playing Red Riding Hood, and this woman in the back of the room just starts crying. And we're like, oh wow, like that's a story. That's a story right there. And we found out through the course of the week that the woman in the back of the room was, of course, her mother, and that her mother had been diagnosed with cancer when she was probably 9 or 10 years old. And this girl had become her mother's primary caretaker. And the mother was crying because she was like, I'm just so happy that she gets to have this childhood experience. And, you know, you come across stories like that and they change you, you know. Yet again, when I was in the inner city, there was this girl that was kind of, you know, when I first got there, she was so loud and ridiculous and over the top. And I remember at the end of the week being like, you know, I can tell that you have all this energy and all of this joy and all of this power. And if you could just, you know, channel all of that, you could go somewhere and you could do something with it. And I know and I trust that you can. And I think that sometimes you have to have those moments with kids where you're like, you have the chance, but you just need to like step up to the plate.
Right. That's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that lady and her daughter who was her, you know, primary caregiver at such a young age, and just like, but like the mom so happy that her daughter is able to, you know, have that glimpse of childhood, you know, because it doesn't always seem like a fair deck sometimes that's, you know, thrown out of the card table of life, does it?
I feel like there are some people that like stub their toe and that's the worst thing that happens to them, and then there are some people that like lose both parents and can never hold a job. Like, it's so crazy how life works out. I have some people, it's like, this is your deck and this is yours.
Right.
You know?
You're like, what's going on here? Yeah, and it does seem like there's some inadequacies as far as, you know, favoritism of, you know, but in any event, I mean, the positive things that you're doing with this group, and we have about 4.5 minutes left, but what are, you have a partner, you have a co-writer in the Ford 150?
Yeah, you have like a business partner, otherwise known as your tour partner.
Yeah.
I've had 2 at this point, and I'm going to be touring with my friend Eric this summer, so that's really exciting.
Sure. And so that must be a very intense personal relationship, because pretty much that's who you have to decompress these situations with.
What I always tell people, I was like, it's like getting married without ever dating the person.
Yeah.
Because like all of a sudden they'll be like, this is your tour partner, and you contact them and like, you know, let's like just pray that you get along, because if you don't, like, it can be a really, really rough time if you don't get along with the other person.
Because you've got to drive in this Ford 150 all across the country and the world.
My first drive for the like summer is not going to be the longest drive that I've done, but it's going to be 26 hours.
Wow.
I've had to do like 33-hour drives, you know?
Wow. So you better like enjoy the same music or something, or just a conversation.
I know. Yeah, you better like the other person, because like if they're like, you know, if you're like left wing, you know, Democrat, and they're right-wing Republican, you just don't see eye to eye on anything in life. Yeah. It's going to be really hard.
Man, I can just, I mean, there's almost like a movie or a play about this experience doing the plays.
That's actually a good idea. I could like write a play about it, about this experience of being like a 2-person circus.
Tell me some more funny road stories or crazy road stories.
Crazy road stories. Well, I stole a bike at one point.
All right, let's go there. You know, this is CCON, so the judicial laws.
So I was in this like little remote island off of Vancouver Island, maybe around January, and we went to go do our laundry because, of course, every single week you have to wash all of the costumes. And so we're doing the laundry, and we're like, oh man, we don't have any money, so I had to drive back into town to get money. And of course, when I drive back into town, because I left my partner, you know, with the laundry, I locked my key in the car, and I'm like, oh no, what am I gonna do? Like, it's just long enough that I can't walk. I was like, But if I had a bike, I could get there in no time. And so I was like, okay, gotta find a bike, gotta find a bike, gotta find a bike. And then I found one, and I took it. I remember just like riding back to her as fast as I could. I was like, I did not steal that bike. Can I borrow your keys? And she's like, what did you do? I was like, just let me borrow your keys. The faster I get back to put this bike back.
Meanwhile, someone's watching the show on
somebody's
video.
like, where's my bike?
Where's my bike? That girl.
It got back there. I never heard anything about it. But
that's funny.
Yeah.
It was a borrow. You know, no
I borrowed it. No problem.
It was for the greater good.
I guess the two other craziest stories were also Canada stories. With all the forest fires happening up there, I actually ended up being evacuated from a forest fire when I was up there.
Okay.
I was in this lovely farmhouse in northern BC, and we had our rehearsal, and apparently during the day, like, the fires had just gone crazy.
Yeah.
And we get back to the house, and it was like the silence before the storm. We're all just sitting around the table, like me, my tour partner, and the people that were housing us in our homestay. We're eating food, and everything's just silent. And they're like, there's a good chance we're gonna have to evacuate. And we're just like, yeah? Okay. Like 15 minutes later, they're like, pack everything up, put it in your truck, get out of here, like get to the evacuation station. It was like right down their driveway. It was just this huge, like massive forest fire. I've never seen anything like it.
Interesting.
It was insane. Yeah,
that must have been scary.
Yeah, I just remember feeling like the world was spinning. I was like,
nice. We're gonna save the next story for the next episode.
Great.
Is there anything you want to say as we have 30 seconds left? Any final mantra, words of wisdom for the Messier mantra?
I guess just the classic: take life with a grain of salt. In all of these situations, find joy in it, find love in it, and try not to focus on the bad. Put some salt on it.
That's awesome. Laine Wagner, thanks for being on Messier Mantra.
Yeah, of course.
I'm Mike Messier. Thank you for watching Messier Mantra with our guest Laine Wagner. We'll see you next time.